Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Learning Together here on the Recovery Couch. I'm your host, Brandon Couch, and today we're going to dive into a topic that is a pretty common theme that we hear when we talk about substances these days, and that topic is marijuana. Marijuana is the most frequently used illicit drug in the United States. The potency of the active ingredient in marijuana is THC, and THC has increased dramatically since the early 1960s. Marijuana has depressant, stimulant, some analgesic, and even hallucinogenic effects depending on which strand of marijuana that you're using. Marijuana has from 4 to 10 times the amount of tar and carcinogenic substances that are found in cigarettes, creating a high risk of lung damage. Marijuana does have both physical and psychological dependency potential, and marijuana does cross the placenta and creates fetal effects. We're going to get into some facts on marijuana, but I want to take a second to give a shout out to my friend A10 Rory, who follows us on TikTok. I'm so appreciative of all the people who are following on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Your support means a lot to me. A10 Rory, what's up, dude? The facts on marijuana. Marijuana is probably the most controversial of all the psychoactive drugs. There are more myths and misconceptions about marijuana, its nature, its addiction potential, and the physical and psychological problems associated with marijuana more than any other substance known to man. It is the most popular drug of abuse, aside from alcohol. And it is estimated that better than 25% of the total population of the United States have tried marijuana at least once. It's also estimated that between 3 to 5 million Americans are daily users. Marijuana is a mixture of the crushed leaf, flower, small branches, stems, and seeds of the hemp plant called cannabis sativa. It grows wild in temperature and tropical areas throughout much of the world. Marijuana is cultivated in many countries. If it were legal federally, marijuana would be the largest cash crop grown in the United States. Marijuana is a depressant drug, though it does have psychedelic effects in high doses. As a result, it is classified in both categories, although most professionals classify it as a psychedelic. Understand that's a loose term. I've been the chemical dependency industry, the recovery world, I've been in it for a long time, and that's not across the board. I want to make sure I make that clear. Not every chemical dependency professional out there classifies it as a psychedelic, but according to this book, some do. Unlike sedatives, marijuana does not produce anesthesia or death, which is a plus. That's a pro in the marijuana category. Unlike psychedelics, there is little cross-tolerance between marijuana and other psychedelics. So in other words, using marijuana does not seem to lessen the impact of using other psychedelics. Marijuana is not a single chemical. At the present time, there are at least 426 known compounds in the marijuana plant, 61 compounds which are unique to marijuana. In addition, when marijuana is burned, an additional 1,500 compounds are formed. Chemical compounds found only in marijuana are referred to as cannabinoids. They are the most active and principal mind-altering ingredients of marijuana. The primary cannabinoid that has been identified is delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC for short. The amount of THC present in marijuana determines the potency of the drug. Various parts of the plant have different concentrations of THC, so the potency of the drug sold on the street is determined by the type of plant materials in the mixture, as well as the conditions in which the plant is grown. The parts of the plant, along with their THC concentrations, are as follows. The root, which the plant has a long tap root which has no THC value. The stalk is hollow and fibrous and may grow up to 4 inches in diameter. The fibers were once used to make hemp rope. There is very little THC in the stalk. The branches, and branching depends on how the plant is grown. When crowded together, there are few branches on the stalk. If uncrowded, there are many branches. There is some THC that is found in the branches. The leaves. The male plant is well known for its 5 leaflets per leaf. The female plant may have 7 or more leaflets per leaf. A moderate amount of THC is found in the leaves. The buds, the flowers, and the seeds. In the male plant, there is production of flowers that pollinate the female plants. These buds and flowers have little THC value. The female plant buds, then flowers if pollinated, then they seed. the buds of the female plant contain the highest concentration of THC. The THC concentration of marijuana has dramatically increased over the past 40 years. In the 1960s, the purity of THC was less than 0.2%. Today, THC concentrations average between 5 to 8% pure, with some concentrations of over 18%, making the marijuana today 25 to 40 times more potent. This is highly significant because the drug we studied and tested in the 60s is not the same drug that people are using today. Marijuana is sold in a variety of forms. The common forms are as follows: Behang, the dried leaves and flowering shoots of the cannabis plant, containing small amounts of THC. Ganja, the resinous mass derived from the small leaves and branches of the cannabis plant. Hashish, the resinous secretions of the female cannabis plant that are collected from the flowering tops, dried, and then compressed into various forms such as balls or cakes. Hashish is a form of cannabis that is generally more potent than marijuana, having THC concentrations of up to 10%. Hash is the major form of marijuana used in the Middle East and in North Africa. In the Far East, this product is referred to as charas. Hashish oil is a dark, viscous liquid produced by a process of repeated extraction of cannabis plant materials. Hashish oil is a solvent such as ether and is mixed with the marijuana mixture, removing more of the existing THC. This product has the highest THC concentrations, upwards of 60%. Marijuana, the general term for the most common form of the drug used on the streets. It contains all forms of the cannabis plant, which are dried, chopped, and mixed into a tobacco-like product. Sinsemilla, a seedless variety of high-potency marijuana, originally grown in California and prepared from the unpollinated female marijuana plant. And the final variety of marijuana is Thai sticks, a cannabis preparation that is common in Southeast Asia. It consists of marijuana buds bound onto short sections of bamboo. There are very few other drugs that have as many names as marijuana. The name marijuana is likely derived from the Mexican slang for cheap tobacco. One street name is the English equivalent, Mary Jane. Some of the more applied names are Acapulco Gold, Ace, Ganja, Grass, Hemp, Reefer, Sativa, Weed. The history of the drug marijuana dates back to 2700 BC in ancient China. The plant was known as Ma, M-A, a Chinese word that meant valuable or endearing. The plant was valued for its fibers, which were used to manufacture rope, cloth, and paper. It was also discovered that the resins, flowers, and leaves had some medicinal value, and potions were made and used to treat gout, malaria, and gas pains. By the year 500 BC, the Chinese virtually banned the use of the plant due to its unpredictable intoxicating effects. They replaced marijuana with opium, preferring opium's smooth, tranquil, and predictable sedation. Marijuana was introduced in ancient India specifically for its mind-altering effects. It was used in religious ceremonies for its euphoria-producing ability and was cultivated commercially. In due time, the plant was known for its intoxicating effects as well as for its value in the production of rope and cloth, which would be the hemp. Commercial cultivation spread through Asia, Africa, and Europe. By the time the Europeans were exploring the New World, the cannabis plant had great commercial success. As a result, English settlers brought the plant to colonies in America during the early 17th century, making marijuana our first cash crop. Before long, cannabis plants were abundant and the hemp fiber industry was flourishing. Through the intoxicating and psychoactive properties of the plant were well known, the general American public showed relatively little interest in marijuana as non-medical, recreational drug. It was predominantly used in medicines, with cannabis preparations being prescribed legally for numerous physical and mental ailments until 1940. That's when the Harrison Narcotics Act was passed by Congress. Many available drugs were removed from the marketplace, but the act excluded marijuana from any control. Marijuana smoking did not become prominent until the era of Prohibition. Mexican immigrants and West Indian sailors introduced the practice in states along the Mexican border and in Gulf states. With the absence of alcohol as an intoxicant, marijuana smoking became popular in urban populations. During the 1930s, allegations of marijuana abuse and increased violence associated with its use began to spread. Tales of bizarre effects, murder, rape, sexual excesses, and memory loss began to circulate. The federal government produced a film entitled Reefer Madness in an effort to educate the public of the growing concern for marijuana addiction. By 1935, most state governments enacted laws against the non-medical use of marijuana. There was a growing growing concern as to the epidemic of marijuana use. It was during this time that cannabis and its extracts were inaccurately classified as narcotics in scientific literature as well as legal provisions. Such classification was responsible for some of the harsher penalties associated with possession of marijuana, including life in prison and the death penalty. In 1937, the federal government enacted the Marijuana Tax Act, which in effect banned the non-medical possession and use of cannabis on a national level. During the World War II era, marijuana was again commercially grown in the United States. Hemp rope had been replaced with rope made from fibers of the sisal plant that was grown in the Philippines, and because of the Japanese invasion of the Philippines, sisal rope was no longer available, so farmers in the United States were encouraged to cultivate the marijuana plant for rope production. As a result, the plant again became widespread in the growth across the United States, even after the war. Birds apparently like the seeds of the marijuana plant, and by eating the seeds and passing them in bird droppings, marijuana plants began to grow wild across the United States, which is very interesting. Because of its availability, marijuana became one of the most popular drugs of use during the late 1950s and through much of the 1960s. Its popularity remains today, and many scientific studies have been performed to determine the health hazards associated with its use, but the majority of studies were inconclusive or contradictory. As a result, many users of the drug use this uncertainty to advocate changes in drug laws that outlawed recreational use of the drug. Many states have decriminalized marijuana, reducing the penalty for possession and use of small amounts of the drug. There continues a national effort by some groups to legalize the drug, claiming that the drug is no worse than alcohol or tobacco. Because of the refinements in the production of marijuana, marijuana today is not the same marijuana studied in the 1960s. The THC concentrations are 25 to 50 times more potent, with some forms of hashish being up to 100 times more potent. So as we've talked about throughout this discussion, potency of THC has been studied as the actual marijuana plant and the active ingredient of the marijuana plant have been studied. They've been able to increase the potency of the active ingredient, which is again THC, or in the long form, tetrahydrocannabinol. So today we're seeing upwards of 50 to 60% more potency in THC than we were seeing when it became widespread in the 50s and 60s. So what are the acute physical effects of marijuana? Well, when marijuana is smoked, it rapidly absorbs into the bloodstream, reaching the brain in less than 30 seconds. Its physical and psychological effects appear quickly and reach their peak about the same time that smoking is completed. If the drug is taken orally, absorption would take much longer and the effects would develop more slowly over 2 to 3 hours and last longer. In a relatively short period of time, the liver begins to break down THC into many chemical byproducts known as metabolites. Because marijuana is a fat-soluble drug, 25 to 30% of the original THC consumed, along with various metabolites, remains in the body for up to 1 week after the initial dose is taken. The average half-life of marijuana is 36 hours, with some forms of THC having a half-life of 72 hours. A single use of marijuana may require 30 days or longer to clear the system. As a result, marijuana can be detected more accurately and for a longer period of time than most other drugs, up to 6 weeks, depending on the specific test that is used. It is this fat solubility that is also at the heart of the greatest debate about marijuana. Is it addicting? That's the greatest debate about marijuana. Is it addicting? And what do we use as the litmus test for what addiction means? I would say most things are addicting, food included. If it produces dopamine in our brain, it can be addicting. Nicotine, caffeine, carbohydrates, sugar. All these things can have addictive properties. Our brain is going to crave these things. So where I think I start to form more of a liberal take, a liberal stance on marijuana is like food or sugar, you're not experiencing extreme withdrawal effects like you would from opiates, stimulants. You have to replace the dopamine levels that the food, in this case the marijuana, rushes to your brain. So there's going to be a little bit of a different feeling on the come down or the withdrawal, but it's not going to send you into a recovery treatment center in almost all cases. If you get incarcerated for possession of marijuana and you find yourself in jail with somebody who was incarcerated for possession of heroin or fentanyl, you're going to notice that the person that was incarcerated from the heroin or the fentanyl is going to be having extreme, serious withdrawal effects, lethargic, diarrhea, vomiting, sweats, restless leg syndrome, while the person who got arrested for marijuana doesn't have any of those symptoms. There maybe some yawns, maybe some lethargy. So what are we using as the litmus test for what makes something addictive? Because I think everybody consumes things that are addictive. Tolerance of marijuana does occur, but this is a natural occurrence that happens with any type of drug, and it does not alone indicate addiction. Also, there is not any life-threatening abstinence syndrome. There is, though, a noticeable withdrawal syndrome upon stoppage of use, and it may not manifest itself for many weeks, but we do see irritability, restlessness, and even nausea and vomiting in some individuals that use frequently. A single use of marijuana impairs motor coordination, specifically hand steadiness, body sway, accuracy of carrying out body movements, and maintaining stable body posture. Although an individual under the influence of marijuana may feel fluid and graceful, they are actually quite clumsy. And reaction time, like the time lag between a signal and a person's reaction to that signal, may actually increase, though not for all who use the drug. The ability to follow a moving stimulus is significantly and consistently diminished, lasting for 4 to 8 hours beyond the point of intoxication. Such a disability would interfere with driving skills significantly. Additionally, the ability to perceive a brief flash of light is significantly impaired. This impaired visual perception also constitutes a major risk for users who operate cars or heavy machinery. So, I think the debate with this substance today is as a medical option for pain, anxiety, when you're talking about things like cancer, is this a good option as opposed to the other options that doctors prescribe as far as medicines are concerned? Would somebody be better off who is receiving cancer treatment, experiencing large amounts of pain? Would they be better off being prescribed marijuana, or would they be better off being prescribed Percocet? I think that is the major debate that as a society we need to look at. I'm not advocating for marijuana to be used for personal use, but I am advocating for us to change our thought process to something that has less addictive qualities and a whole lot less withdrawal symptoms as a medical alternative to some of these other drugs. So we've talked about the physical effects of marijuana. We've talked about the acute physical effects of marijuana, the history of marijuana. What I'd like for you to do is just comment, and let me know what is your take on marijuana. As a nation, we collectively are becoming more liberal in our stance on marijuana. But some people still stand firm that it's a drug. It changes your brain chemistry. It changes the way you think, the way you act, and they believe that it has no place. So comment in the comment section. Let me know what your stance is, what your take is. Also, like and subscribe. Let's get this message out to as many people as possible. We're raising awareness, and we're doing so with factual information. And you can help push this mission forward just by a simple share or a like or a comment, a subscribe. And don't forget to go check out my book, Step 4, Journey Through Addiction. It's available on my website, www.recoverycouch.com. It's also available through any book retailer out there. It's a message of hope and redemption, but it's a good story also. I've gotten nothing but good reviews. I think you'll like it. It's not just for people in recovery. It's a story for anybody who's had to overcome anything in their life. It's a message of hope that you're not too far gone, and with a little bit of resilience, some hard work, a community that's rooting for you, you're capable of doing anything you want. So go check that out. Again, it's Step 4, A Journey Through Addiction is the title. That's it for this episode of Learning Together here on the Recovery Couch. Just remember that you always have a seat right here on the Recovery Couch. This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, Greg brings heart, hustle, and honesty to every deal. Call Greg at 937-477-8975 today and tell him the Recovery Couch sent you. This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by JB Davis at South Dayton Toyota. For integrity, service, and unbeatable deals, call JB and his team at 513-267-5225 and tell them the Recovery Couch sent you.